All right. So week two. Um, Once again, we're using OBS tonight, so we'll see how well that works. If this thing gets to be in the way, we'll just broadcast it differently. But anyway, we'll pursue this and make sure it works and doesn't detract. I put out the link for the broadcast, whatever. Don't feel like you got to be a part of it in terms of taking time out of your day when you're signed up for a distance course or asynchronous or what have you. It's not a requirement, but it's an attempt to kind of make it more interactive and to prove that we're live. We got the simulated dog noises in the background. What we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to talk about this second week of basically some of the financial documents that you might need. Now, don't get whatever. We're not going to spend a great deal of time. We're just going to look at some of the financial statements. Normally, because everybody, meaning every company, whatever that you deal with, they have their own way of kind of dealing with things. And they typically will insist on their own documents. So these things, you can draw them up for yourself. But, when it comes right down to it, the bank, the mortgage company, the whoever is going to want to see, it in their own format. Because obviously they're comfortable, reviewing things that are already in their same format they see every day. Now, you can get some use out of these things just to kind of see where you stand by drawing them up for yourself, or maybe presenting them to the mortgage company. But yeah, good luck with that one. They're probably going to insist that information be entered on their documents. Personal cash flow statement. So cash flow doesn't really show your investments, right? Cash flow cash flows deal with how you're going to function financially on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis. Inflows, outflows, interest. So, it doesn't really show it doesn't show your net worth. But the truth is, in life and in business especially, businesses fail based upon not being able to meet cash flow. They don't have the liquidity. They don't have the income. They may have the assets. They may have some sort of intellectual property that's worth a lot, but if they can't meet payroll, they're done. So the same is true with you. You may have, you might be living in $1 million piece of property, but if you can't pay the property taxes, you're going to lose that. So it can be important. So create a statement over a period of time, usually a pretty short period of time for cash flow. And net cash flows, inflows minus outflows. Here it is for, this mythical person. So Stephanie Spratt. And she's got $2,500 disposable. Not bad. So doesn't have any investments. So, I'd want to see something probably different, or at least be attempting to get some investment income coming in. I mean, you definitely want your money working harder than you do, unless you're going to be, living on cash. So, renting $600 a month, internet $50, electricity. Anyway, you can see the different charges that go in here. Now, the total cash flows, and so net cash flow, $400 to the positive, meaning $400 in excess. What I'm going to show you tonight, at least we'll discuss it in a video that you'll see. There's this man with these really annoying hand gestures, but he's got a good heart and all that kind of stuff. And he's talking about paying yourself first. So ideally, in all these different categories here, you would like to get to the point where you have a category that says, investment or savings or retirement or whatever. It doesn't need to be a huge, chunk, and it shouldn't preclude you from putting in more money. But if you got $2,500 a month coming in, 10% is $250. So, if you did that, imagine you paid yourself first, you would have, that extra 150 a month. Doesn't sound like a whole lot of money, but granted, some of these categories, recreation, $600. I don't know. It's tough to specify something like recreation, and most things don't have trips that equate to stuff like that. So, car expenses again. If things go bad, I wish maintenance was $200 a month, but sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Insurance is consistent. Fuel. Anyway, so a lot of these are guesses, but at least there's a attempt to budget it. And the rent, the internet, consistent, electricity and water, or at least energy. If you're paying, well, maybe if you're paying, it sounds like she's paying her own heat. That's gonna vary wildly. Not to get depressing, but it's freaking cold, and this would be a very expensive time. So you'd have to budget a little bit more, and basically nothing in the summer. So budgeting's a good thing, but that person has set up a thing. So, staging your career path. But you're going to find that, oh man, if I only, once I get that other job, I'm going to have all kinds of excess money. Yeah, that would be the thing if your needs and wants stayed the same. Your needs are probably going to grow, especially if you're going to be, starting a family, stuff like that. But your wants are going to creep right in there, and it's going to expand. Your budget's going to expand. It's like a gas. It's going to expand to the volume available. It's like your emptied garage. It doesn't stay empty very long. However big your garage is, it'll be full in a year of garbage for the most part. I'm doing some spring cleaning with all this cold weather, so that's why it's kind of top of mind right now. Type of job. So something to think about, especially when you're still in a phase where maybe you aren't exactly certain what you're doing. You may find that you need something that perhaps makes more money, or you may find that you really don't like any of those type of things. Anyway, one thing you want to avoid in life is becoming, job locked, where your bills are such that you can't quit, that you hate your job. You can't even transition to something else because you're stuck. Maybe you've already encountered that. Hopefully you don't. Hopefully you'll find something you like to do that pays good enough. But anyway, it's definitely something to be avoided, and living within your means and having a little nest egg on the side does give you that ability, that kind of FU money to get out of a bad situation. So anyway, number of earners. So that could change too. You could, end up with a situation, where somebody chooses to stay at home, or chooses, not to do whatever, or do a different thing, or maybe, start a side hustle that will hopefully, become a main hustle, but it's going to take a while to develop. So things can change. Size of the family, age, consumption behavior. This is, again, when you're in a relationship, you'll quickly figure out if you're not compatible. A lot of times it has to do with money. But anyway, this is how it's supposed to be. Yeah, I don't know why you're making more money through college. But anyway, career, this steady progression, wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you go, okay, maybe you made a bunch of money at some point, and then you're just like, yeah, I'm going to do something I want to do, and it tapers off. Or you didn't pay attention in class, and you don't get to retire. And so you got to keep working. Or maybe you want to work. Maybe you're actually doing something you really do like. And, this notion, a lot of the retirement investments are kind of tapered or strategized to, where you're going to be making less money in retirement. And that's when you're going to withdraw the money, and you're going to be in a lower tax bracket. Not always. Not always. Creating a budget. So we kind of looked at that. We looked at Stephanie Spratt's stuff. Things that are controllable are great, but not all things are, especially with, inflation and a medical system that's probably not up to speed. So, a lot of people, we will talk about medical insurance, but if you get to a point where, you may not want to work for a big soulless corporation, but if they've got good benefits, it makes life tough to pass that up. So, Yep, we saw this. Actual amounts last month, and then what actually happened. So anyway, yeah, it's a guess. And believe me, concentrating and budgeting like this can kind of take all the fun out of things. But having a good estimate, or at least going back and figure out what happened. To be honest with you, do I budget like this? Not so much. I tend to put everything kind of on credit cards, although I'm a convenience user. Credit cards, if you pay them off every month, it's actually, for me, it works. But that's only if you have the capacity to pay them off. If you're starting to carry a balance, that plan is horribly expensive. But for me, if I was to spend everything in cash, my father was like that. He always had change in his pocket, always had money, and it was just a different time and not nearly as convenient. And if you did try to use a credit card like I did, I mean, you would frustrate everybody in life if they have to pull out some, goofy machine that they used to have 40 years ago and, make you sign for everything. Now it's, in most cases, quicker to pay with a credit card, as you all know. So anyway, that's one way of doing it, and then kind of go back and basically see what happened. But anyway, only works if you're a disciplined spender and a disciplined, person who pays off that credit card. If you can't pay off your credit card, then you've got, that's just not a good option for you. Convenience user, but what I mean by that is you pay off the balance every month. If you pay off the balance every month with, your credit card, then you don't accrue any interest. If you're going to start paying interest, you're not a convenience user. You're an asset to that credit card company, because you are going to be paying horrendous credit card bills. There's a concept. It's called usury, and like if you wanted to borrow some money from me, and I said, okay, I'll charge you 50% or 30% or something like that. That's actually illegal. That's like loan sharking on my part, because I'm charging an interest rate that's excessive. Normally it's tied to whatever the standard rate is between the banks plus a couple more percent. And if you're charging anything above that, that's usury. That's a criminal act. Well, there's certain states that, don't have strong usury laws. And go figure, that's where the credit cards are located. So if you look at your statement and you go, oh, Delaware. I wonder what goes on in Delaware is where all the flaky corporations go. If you're doing business with a corporation based out of Delaware, it's, that's because it's fortuitous to the corporation. Trying to sue a corporation in Denver, the tie goes to the corporation. Everything goes to the corporation. So you used to find all the credit card companies were located there. Now, other states, I think it's North Dakota, maybe it's South Dakota. Anyway, out in the Dakotas, one of those states has also decided, yeah, we can get all these credit card companies to locate in our state by allowing, confiscatory interest rates to be charged. So when you're paying 28%, you're going, well, that's not legal. Yeah, it is in that state, and that's why the credit card companies are there. They are not your friends. Credit card companies make, they make roughly 3% on every charge, right? And then their other income stream, their bigger income stream, are the knuckleheads who don't pay their balance, and that's where they make the real money. Although, there's a fine line between somebody paying exorbitant interest rates and then not paying any more and skating on the debt. That's, So anyway, part of it has to do with credit card companies having to charge high interest rates because people flake out. Credit card debt is at an all-time high. So, the economy may look good in terms of the stock market, but again, it's just a few companies that are making all the money right now. But the overall people living paycheck to paycheck are, it's pretty excessive. So, anticipating cash shortages. So what you can do here is you can set up an emergency fund. Now, don't keep it all in your checking account. You don't want to keep a huge balance in your checking account. Number one, it's not doing anything for you. It might be getting you some fractional amount of interest, and I mean, a tenth of what inflation is. So you're just wasting money there. And then also identity theft and the rest of it. It's you have so many transactions going in and out of there that you could easily get ripped off. So you may want to start a second account, and for me, I'd set it up with a brokerage, a mutual fund or a stock company or whoever I have. You may already be associated with one through your work, or you may just pick one, but we'll talk more about that when we get into investments. But having an emergency fund with 5-6 grand in it of cash is not a bad thing. Number one, they'll give you a reasonable interest rate, and number two, if you don't use that emergency fund when it starts getting in the 8,000-10,000 range or something higher than what you probably need, you just shovel it into your investment account, so it's seamless. But you have that psychological barrier of not staring at it in your checking account, because if it's staring at you in your checking account, you'll find some way to spend it, and that's not much of an emergency fund when you spend it on something before you ever got to the emergency. So compare predicted cash flows to actual cash flows. Adjustments may be necessary. So again, some people love this, some people don't. I kind of try to use a bucket method, and keep a running thing in my mind. But also I try not to, I don't like payments. I don't have, if I'm going to buy something like a snow machine or a four-wheeler or something like that, I'm pretty much going to pay cash. I don't want those kinds of consumer debts out there, a bunch of different bills to float around. And for that part, I don't get a thrill out of new cars anymore. I'd rather buy something that, I don't know, I guess I'm showing my age, but me being enamored with Zoom and, some of this other stuff, it may be because I'm an analog mind in a digital world. I like vehicles that, I can kind of understand and can do something for me. But that's just me. Okay, so forecast net cash flows over several months. Yep, unexpected. The medical thing, difficult. Especially if you're going to try and pay medical out of pocket. How much are you going to set aside? It's going to have to be a lot. Car and home maintenance. Yep. It's not bad to have kind of a slush fund kind of set aside for stuff like that. Or get ahead of things or keep up on the maintenance so you don't have huge whatever. But, and you can expand it out to an annual budget. Okay, so here she is. She's done it for a couple 3 months and then made some adjustments. And again, if I'm going to go through the trouble of doing things, a big category like recreation. My recreation expenses, I don't know, maybe you're saving up for a cruise if you're into that stuff or something like that and you're making payments towards it. I don't know. But that's a weird category to have that big a chunk of your income. Anyway, or maybe she's just not honest. Maybe she's, should say alcohol or something. Whatever the issue is, but it's a little nebulous there. Okay, improving the budget. So, focus on ethics. Yeah, you don't want to. You can only become. Most people will not let you become overly dependent on others. You're going to quickly wear out your friendships. Learn to live within your means, and things will go much better. So, it's done it for an annualized basis. Now, again, if you don't have some sort of mental budget going on, you may have something imposed upon you. People think, I'll just declare bankruptcy. Well, guess what? If you declare bankruptcy, you've kind of gone to the court and said, I'm not good with money. And so they'll just kind of take it from you and they'll give you an allowance. And you'll get your budget right back at you, but this time you can't go outside of it. There's a lot of downsides to bankruptcy, but one result is when you say you're not very good with your money, I need some help managing it, you may get that personal attention that you don't want. Financial planning online, it is much easier. For me, again, I'd look at my statements because you have to look at, if you're going to use credit cards or, credit cards are kind of reality. Life is very expensive if you don't have credit cards, because try and rent a car or, get on an airplane or whatever, paying cash. People look at you funny and you pay outside of a month. Legally, they don't have as many requirements in terms of what they have to do. If you catch it within a few days or so, they're very pleasant to deal with, and they're very helpful. And they'll say that they're taking care of you, where that's just the smart thing to say on their part. They have to take care of it because by law they're required to. But anyway, so what I'm saying is, if I'm checking my statement anyway, I can kind of look at the budget and go, yeah, things are perhaps getting a little out of hand in one specific category. But anyway, for budgeting apps, another online asset, you've got the Intuit people. So Mint is one that they mention in the book, and Intuit is a big company that is going to kind of give you all kinds of free stuff, which what that means, that if you're not paying for the service, you are the service. They're selling your information. So but Intuit, they've got all sorts of reasons to establish a relationship with you, and you as a college student, the common demographic going to be young, upwardly mobile. They want you on TurboTax. They want you on Credit Karma, checking your credit score, maybe even paying them a fee. QuickBooks, doing accounting. MailChimp, at least they're honest here. They're going to send you all sorts of junk mail, so they might just be the ones to own the company. And so anyway, if it works for you, great. But keep in mind, you're don't be shocked when you sign up with Mint and all of a sudden you start getting bombarded with all sorts of other offers. Personal balance sheet. So now we're starting to get into things that might start to show your net worth, liabilities and assets. So personal balance sheet. So it doesn't say anything about your ability to pay the bills. I mean, it may show that you've got a reasonable income, that your assets are growing and your liabilities are hopefully not. But again, it's a point in time. Doesn't necessarily address cash. And again, liabilities. Not all liabilities are created equal. Liabilities like a low interest mortgage on a house in a good neighborhood that's going to be increasing in value, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You're controlling a lot of money with with that liability. If it's a bunch of credit card debt or vehicle debt, that's not good. Those are depreciating assets, so it makes a difference. We've talked about liquidity, converted to cash. So other things, I've seen people talk about, I've got, so much in my wardrobe, and I've got, this vehicle. Well, if the vehicle's underwater, meaning it's worth less than the loan on it, So some of these things you can't necessarily convert into cash very quickly. You have to be honest with yourself and say, okay, if I was to put this on Craigslist or Marketplace, what could I get for it? And that's what it's worth. So it makes a huge difference. I was in the Middle East for a long time, and friends of mine were always buying carpets, talking about how much they were worth and what a great investment they were. And I was in Afghanistan, and I was buying. Well, I wasn't buying so many, but I certainly had a lot of gems offered to me. And you have even more problems because now you've got, fakes out there. A lot of fake gems, and even if the carpets, I mean, some of these were just amazing. Persian carpets, Persian rugs. But who are you going to sell them to? People who Marketplace looking for a full price rug, no, they're going to be in a boutique somewhere. So anyway, I kind of tested this out many years ago. I was in the Middle East, and I had a good Turkish friend, and he lent me a few rugs, and I took them back because I had to go to New Jersey for the weekend, which is pretty dismal to begin with. So tried to make at least something out of it, and so I took a couple rugs with me, and I went to a rug dealer, and sure enough, the rugs there sold for 4 times the price of what they did in Turkey. And so I said, well, I've got a couple with me. Do you want to buy them? And the guy offered me exactly what they go for in Turkey. So not so good. All right, I'm getting an error message on the OBS stream. Not good. Not good. Let me just open it, see what's going on. Open Studio. Error. Ugh. So, not a lot of value added to this portion. Open widget. We're going to give this about 2 more potatoes. Moving on. All right. So, like I say, I'm not some YouTube streamer here, so not a big deal. Okay, so investments, bonds, and stocks. So, good to have. That's kind of a limited scope of investments, but quickly, we'll talk a whole lot more about stocks and bonds. Mutual funds are probably more appropriate for most people. Mutual funds would be a collection of stocks or bonds under a manager, but you can own individual bonds, individual stocks. To be, just a quick definition, bonds are basically a loan to a company, an entity, maybe a government agency. That's what they use to raise money. The holder of the bond has given that entity a loan. You don't own any part of that company. It's not an equity position. Stocks, on the other hand, they'll talk about stocks and they'll use the same term or synonymous as equities. Equity means that you own a portion of that company. If the company fails, are you better off with a bond or a stock? Neither one's a good position. But yeah, a bond is probably slightly better. A stock, you've got zero recourse. You can't say, well, I need my money back from that company that failed. No, that was your company that failed, so you went down with the ship. But a bond, how are they going to repay you if they're out of business? So you probably lost that money as well. So mutual funds, we will talk about that just shortly. So this mutual funds, if you wanted to invest in stocks or maybe even some bonds, mutual funds can hold all kinds of different investments. But let's say the mutual funds can be comprised of all kinds of different investments. But let's say you want to invest in computers, and you're like, I'm just going to buy Apple. Well, number one, Apple is kind of whatever. They have phones, computers, and other stuff, other products. But you've got everything tied into one company. Granted, it's a good company, but you're tied into one company. You could buy a mutual fund that is, some sort of high-tech or tech mutual fund that owns, a lot of Apple. But they also own some Acer and maybe some NVIDIA and maybe a whole range of companies across the tech sector. And if you've kind of guessed right, that computers are going to, be profitable, you're going to do well. But you don't have the risk. You're not completely tied to just a single company like Apple. You don't need to be right about everything. You just need to be right about the sector. If you're going to pick a specific company like Apple, then you're tied directly to that company. And Apple's been around a while. They're still doing well, but there might be some emerging companies that will get higher growth, or they might have a bad week, or a crummy phone comes out or something like that. And you're, even though the sector went up, Apple itself was flat or went down. So there's different risks involved, but generally mutual funds are the preferential investment for most investors who aren't going to be, in the weeds managing their investments day to day. A mutual fund, there's usually a fund manager who takes care of that. And then also they could be in indexes. And there's a whole lot more to mutual funds, but that's just kind of one example. Real estate holdings, real estate, it can actually be commercial real estate or raw land or your own home. All that's good. Real estate investments, for the most part, though, are pretty stable, not liquid. And I love real estate, but and I've made some money in real estate, but I use real estate as kind of a comfort area to get money that I perhaps make someplace else and invest it there for stability, because it generally doesn't go down. It can, but not very often. Depends on the market as well. So liabilities. So that's what you own. Okay, there's a concept here they'll call current, they'll call long term. So current and short term would be kind of synonymous. Less than a year. In personal finance in general, IRS, whatever. If they say short term, they mean less than a year. If they say long term, they mean over a year. And it does make a difference, especially like in taxes. Let's say you fortunate enough to make a killing in crypto. If you sell it within a year, it's a short-term capital gain, which means that you'll be taxed at your normal tax rate, which could be 30%, 28, something like that. If it's kept longer than a year, then you'll be taxed at the long-term capital gains rate, which is typically 15%. So it makes a huge difference. But anyway, for definitional sakes, short-term, long-term. So current liabilities, money you owe pretty quick, within a year. Long-term would be, car loans, home mortgages, stuff that's going to be over a year. And then the net worth is the difference between those two. So, yep, you can create that personal balance sheet. And it's just kind of fun to look at, But again, don't get too... Some of these, financial people, and again, I'm not giving that kind of financial advice, but when they say, pay everything in cash. For example, if you try to do that in real estate, you're going to get left behind. If you try to save up cash for your first home, you're going to be saving for so long, that the ship is kind of left, and you're staying in a renting situation, not enjoying any of the benefits, not enjoying, any sort of capital appreciation, and inflation is still working on that house that you've yet to buy. You're lots of reasons. We'll talk more about that. But anyway, some credit, some debt can be good, but credit card debt, never good. Okay, liquid assets. Again, I realize credit cards sometimes, for a lot of people, it is their emergency fund. But try to make sure you have, some sort of emergency fund in cash so that you're not paying on that credit card, just paying that interest. Because all of those charts that we've reviewed, the Excel spreadsheets about how quickly compound interest will accrue for you, it will also work just the same for the credit card companies. The difference being that the credit card companies, though, are getting so much more in terms of interest rates. So, anyway. Okay, so she's got her personal assets. She's got $3,000 in investments. Just all in stocks. Kind of a gutsy move. I would, probably put in a mutual fund. Furniture, cash. Yeah, some of these household assets. Again, how are you going to get that converted? Do I really, is it something that I can have a willing buyer for? I might not make a big deal out of it. But you don't want to be renting furniture. I mean, there's value to it, but in terms of sales value, probably not a whole lot. Credit card balance, so she's carrying a balance. That's pretty high. If she's only making $3,000 a month and she's got $2,000 on her credit card, I don't see how she's going to get that paid off. And if she isn't going to get paid off, then, well, I hate to say it, you probably should own those stocks. You're not going to get 28% return on stocks. And if you do, you're also going to get taxed on that. Whereas your credit card debt that you have outstanding is a problem. Changes the personal balance sheet. So, yep. Purchases a new car. Again, the value of the car, if it's a new car, if you spend $20,000 on a new car, I don't know what you can get for 20 grand, but when you enter that into your assets, it's going to be 15,000. Your debt is going to be, the 20 grand, but you're going to be underwater. If you're driving a new car off the lot, you can't give that car back and get your 20 grand back. No. Still got the balance, no mortgage, total liabilities, and net worth. So the economy can definitely have an effect. And inflation. When they talk about the inflation rate coming down, don't be fooled. The inflation rate can come down, but if inflation went up a couple percent, per month, and then all of a sudden it doesn't go up a couple percent this month, you still have all those other percentage. And, you'd have to be in recessionary times with prices going down. A slowdown in the rate of inflation, that doesn't mean you're money ahead. I mean, you know this when you go to the store. When something, increased in price from $2 to $4, when inflation flattens out, it just means it stays at $4. It doesn't go back down to $2. So inflation is a huge drain on consumers. So, yep. You have to prepare for, we don't have, at the consumer level, a whole lot of input. All we can do is kind of prepare for what the economy is going to be like. Wealth is built by using cash flows to invest in assets without increasing liabilities. More or less. Yep. Yeah, so you want to get to a point in life where your money is working harder than you are. If you just try and gut it out and I'm going to work longer or get paid more throughout the course of my life, at a certain point, it hopefully will make sense not to work as much or maybe even retire, because the amount of money you can make from your retirement savings, your investments, even maybe you're vested and you're getting a retirement from your employer, it'll make sense not to work. That's where you want to be. Or working on things that you only like to do. Different ratios here. Liquid assets divided by current liabilities. Some of these ratios they may want to explore when you're trying to get a loan. Debt to asset ratio. Savings rate. Again, for most of these numbers, what you ought to achieve, what you ought to set up for your savings rate, if you can come up with a percentage and kind of stick with it throughout the course of your life, you're going to be in good shape. Maybe that's 10%, maybe it's 15, maybe it's 20. 20 is not a bad number because 20 kind of equates to what's typically deductible through a 401k, 20 grand per year, and if you're making 100 grand, you're maximizing your 401k. But anyway, some percentage rather than a fixed dollar figure, and that way it increases over time, but it doesn't put such a burden on you because it's a percentage, it's not a finite amount. Time value. So there's going to be all sorts of things we're going to talk about in here that are, I hate to say it, kind of overshadowed by what we talked about the first day. We know this already, right? We know compound interest. So we talked about compound interest first to kind of drive home this point. But we know that the value of amount of money is greater, the earlier it's received. And you start saving quickly. So rather than put that in words, you can look at those charts and see what that is. Now, there's different ways. They try and make this into a bit of a math class, which doesn't have a lot of value to it because, you just plug in numbers into equations. We're not going to have equations and things like that on the test. We'll actually have, maybe some concrete numbers, but it's not going to be math intensive. There's also investments. They talk about an annuity here. Annuity is, well, in personal finance context, it's generally annuities they're sold by insurance companies. And the deal is it's like an insurance company, but exactly the opposite in terms of the only way you can get money from a life insurance policy is to die, right? Well, with an annuity, it pays you if you continue to live. So you give a company, say, $10,000, and they start making you $100 payments from here till forever. And, if that's the deal that's structured. And if you die next week, not such a good deal for you. But if you live for a long time, those payments are going to add up. So that's where it's kind of different than insurance policy because it pays you to live. The problem with annuities, though, is they're kind of complex and they involve a salesperson. And so you start doing all that, and now you have commissions and you have other things, and you have the investments these guys are invested in are probably not as good as what you do through a strict investment company. So insurance companies, they have a purpose, but they're not great at investing because they have to be very cautious. And most of the time you can endure a little bit more risk than that when you're given a higher return. But anyway, but yeah, they're going to want to talk about a single dollar. So you give them $1, lump sum now, and what's it turn into in a certain number of years, or give a series of payments over a course of time. What's that equate to? Or you can work it the other way. You can say, I need 50 grand 5 years from now. How much money do I need to start investing? So what's the present value? So anyway, they'll try and get this all complex for you, but it's not that difficult, especially in the internet age. You can go online and look at some of these things. You type in future value, and rather than give you a formula, they'll just give you plug in the amount of money you need, boom, and the numbers spit out for you. We talked about compounding. That's earning interest on interest. Powerful, powerful concept. So if you want to get in these things, whether you put it in the formula yourself or it asks you these questions online, but it's going to need to know how much you got, what the interest rate is, and what the time is. So it's not overly complex, but they try and make it, with their acronyms. You don't need to spend a lot of time, memorizing all this stuff. N is the periods, I is the interest rates. Yeah, it's extra brain bites that you could probably use better making money rather than doing silly formulas. So this guy's 5,000 now, 4%. What's that going to get me? So yeah, it's a future value of a single amount. Great. And here they go with all their PV, present value, and the number of periods, the interest rate. payment. Anyway, it's usually contextual calculators that you'll find online are more useful. Increase the number of years. So again, we learned this from the charts. Give it a long time to work. $500 a month all of a sudden ends up being, 5.3 million if you give it a long enough time at a good enough interest rate, but not at 4%. Keep in mind, if you're earning 4%, you're not exactly knocking it out of the park when, inflation is greater than 4%. You're losing money. Now, if you put in, $100 in simple interest, you have your 104, maybe if it's compounded, 106 or something at the end of the year. But what can you buy with it? Because of inflation, the buying power of it, you can only buy about $90 worth of stuff, compared to what you could have got the year before. So you got to get off the porch. You got to be getting more than 4%. Higher interest rate, 9%. Now you at least are keeping up with inflation. But keep in mind, that money you lost, you don't get a tax benefit from it. But the money you gained, the IRS wants their chunk of what you earned. So again, some of these charts are kind of impressive, but I think the graphs, the Excel spreadsheet is more impressive. Depends on your debt. So I've got a brother. He, was in a decent financial position. He said, I'm paying off my mortgage. I'm like, yeah, I've got a couple mortgages, one on a rental home and one on another, but, on my primary. But it's just small amounts, but the interest rates are below 3%. I am not paying those off. That I can... If I paid that off, I would have to sell investments that are doing far better than 3% to pay them off. So now if you're paying... Anyway, they're not giving you enough information here. If it's credit card debt, if it's high interest debt, you got to pay it off quick. But if it's to your advantage, if you're renting the money for very cheap, and oh, by the way, if it's real estate, tax deductible, you may want to... I'm not saying to go spend all that money on something stupid, but if you've got a competing investment, it gets back to opportunity cost. If you've got the opportunity to do something else with that money, you may want to do that. But if you can't keep track of your debt, you got a problem. Discounting, process of obtaining present values. So again, discounting, it's a valid word. That is one of the definitions, but it's not something we commonly use. But that's how they're, when they say present value from, if I need 50 grand in 5 years, how much do I need to put in right now? And that would be discounting. So again, not super useful. You won't see that term. We won't talk about that term too much. You may find it out there in personal finance, but anyway. So, obviously, you need those same things. You need to know the amount of money, the interest rate, and the periods. The number of years, months, whatever. So back in the day, real estate people used to have these little calculators on, not calculators, but little tabular data on the back of their business cards so they could calculate mortgages and things like that. It's just kind of silly. It's not done anymore. Smartphone can do it far better and much more efficient. Because keep in mind, if you're buying a home and you say, can I afford the payment? You also need to kind of go, well, how much is my property tax going to be? How much is the insurance on the thing going to be? So your payment may be, let's say, $1,100. Well, your mortgage payment, the part on the loan may be $1,100, but all in, the amount you have to pay each month is maybe 1,500, something like that, because most of the mortgage companies, you think you own the house, but no, the mortgage company owns the house. It's their house. You're just living in it and making the payments until you finish it off. So it's definitely in their interest to make sure that you pay the taxes. And so in most cases, they'll establish an escrow account and pay them for you, with your own money, obviously. But they'd rather you set aside the money with them and they take care of it. And then the same thing with the property taxes. They don't want unpaid property taxes. They don't want their property being auctioned off because you had other priorities with the money that you should have paid the property tax. They're not going to put their property at risk. So anyway, that's what's normally going to happen in the payment, which is all fine. I mean, the numbers are going to be kind of screwy every year, and they're going to come out and they're going to adjust the escrow, and it's just part of home ownership. Nobody's trying to rip each other off, but yeah, they trust you about as far as they can throw you. So anyway, and then they get down to this thing of using the financial calculator. So skip everything we said beforehand. And again, people don't usually have dedicated financial calculators anymore. They just have an app. Okay. So again, you can figure all this stuff out. And if you win the lottery, and they say, hey, do you want $1 million right now, or you get 3 million, 5 years from now? Yeah, you're going to be doing these kind of calculations. But you're probably not going to do them right because you were doing the lottery, and so you clearly didn't understand a lot of financial details anyway. So you're probably going to mess that one up. So anyway, good luck with that. Hire somebody who can give you some advice now that you were lucky enough to win. More present value. Future value of annuity. So annuity, a series of annual payments. You can see that in the name, annuity, like as an annualized, typically is how it's done. But they're doing this in terms of, finding out time value of money. But looking at those Excel spreadsheets, that tells me everything I need to know about time value of money. I can figure it out from there. I can look at the numbers, look at the examples, and get a pretty good grasp. And you can look at your credit card statement if you don't keep track of it, and you'll quickly figure out the time value of money. Everybody ends up pretty much, financially literate by the time they go through life. For most people, though, it's too late. Yeah, I should not have done that. Yeah, I should have invested a bunch of money way back when, but by the time they realize the time value of money, they don't have enough life left to make it work for them. Oh, here's a lottery winner. $150,000 at the end of every year for the next 20 years. So they want to pay you an annuity. That is an annuity, a series of payments. Or they'll give you something in lump sum. What do you want to do? Boom. And that's what they say. Well, it's worth $6 million. Now, granted, you had to, put in an interest rate. Are you getting 7% at the bank right now? Ooh, that's pretty generous. I don't think most banks are giving out 7%. Right now, with interest rates up, but anyway. And then also there's the time value of money in terms of inflation. What can you buy with $6 million, 20 years from now? So you've got that competition with inflation that's always going to occur. And so same thing, present value, working it backwards from the other direction. So they're going to receive $82,000 at the end of every year, 25 years, or give you $700,000. Annual interest rate of 9%. Should you accept the offer? This case, take the money. Again, you're assuming interest rates. It would be nice to have that sort of clarity. And setting goals. So all these things, I mean, the concepts are all valid. I'm just arguing that if you get all wrapped up in these formulas, you're going to be wasting valuable time. You should spend your time, finding an app that's going to give you these values, and then finding the investment that's going to give you the 9%. Keeping track of things and monitoring your investments rather than entering these random formulas. Can motivate you for savings. Yep, see the return. So again, if you can't wrap but I don't know where the formulas help you out on that. Those charts should help you out. Should motivate you. Say, yeah, I can make a difference. I can do just 10%, and I'm going to get ahead. I will be a millionaire if I do this. That can be motivating. How much should I attempt? How much should I, that's trying to calculate for a need that you have now or a price for now. It's kind of tough because you don't know what things are going to cost that much in the future. That much accuracy. Most people just try and do the best they can and get by. And then homework. So, by whatever means you want to, you can get these problems. You don't have to use the formulas per se. But, so the stream is back on. We'll try this again. I'll see what the viewer statistics were, whether anybody's watching it live. I haven't seen anything come through on the chat. But we're going to talk about taxes next week, and it is kind of useful to have kind of multiple screens to explain that. I'm going to, I dumped on Intuit and TurboTax, but man, that is a great tool. Being able to run your taxes through and use TurboTax or one of those other brands is very powerful. And I'm not saying you got to give those people a dime. You do not pay on any of those tax programs until you actually file your taxes. But if you've got, if you're using somebody else to calculate your taxes, or you're, nugging it out some other way, but you want to check the numbers, TurboTax and things like that can be super useful. And so we'll use it as a tool. Once you get to the point we're at right now, right now we're beyond the end of the tax year. The tax year ended in December. December 31st. Anything you do from here on out is going to affect your 2024 taxes. Taxes are always paid in arrears, with the exception of maybe you can put some money in an IRA at this point. But the things about buying or selling assets or moving money around. Anything you do from this point forward will not affect your 2023 taxes. That closed out in December. But what you could have done is sometime maybe in December, November, kind of ran some of those numbers through TurboTax because the software was out there, and kind of figured out whether you should have done something to modify your tax liabilities and stuff like that. So it can be pretty powerful. Again, this lecture is a little dry. We're talking about, some of these concepts like net worth and cash flows and budgeting that different people get out of it. The present value stuff, this would be a tough concept and with very little return for you unless you understood compound interest. If you understand compound interest, you understand 50% of personal finance. It will keep you from doing stupid things and steer you towards smart decisions. So keep that in mind. Good luck, and talk to you next week.